Hey everyone, it's time for another edition of Beaver Banter.
Beaver Sports Talk lives here.
It is the Beaver Banter podcast. I'm CJ Baumgartner. That's Ian Rivers. Ian, just to kind of put things in short, it's the title of today's episode. Beaver hockey comes to a close. Bemidji State softball has a big week. That's kind of our headlining things to talk about. Ian, always a great day to be a Beaver, I think, but it's always a sad day when the hockey season comes to a close, and especially considering the circumstances and considering the opponent. It never is a good time to wrap up a season, but we're going to have to try and find a way to do it. Bemidji men's hockey comes to a close. They lose in Mankato on Saturday night. You were down at the Mayo for all this, so just kind of talk about your day. What were things like at the rink?
Not too bad. I mean, it's a nice rink. That's the first time I've actually been down there for a game. However long I've been trying to talk about actually doing it, this is the first one. For some reason I decided to spring on, even though I knew, unfortunately, that there was like probably a 70% chance that the game ended in the fashion that it did. So, but you want to be there just in case something remarkable happens. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case, but the vibes were pretty solid in the arena beforehand. There was nothing too crazy. I met up with one of the guys from Chat and Mavs before the game and had a conversation with him. Not a whole lot to report, honestly. Nothing crazy happening outside of just one of the more Beaver hockey games of the season. I mean, I feel like I've said this so many times, and it's probably not true most of the time, but I felt like it was in this instance, where that game just kind of perfectly encapsulated a lot of what Bemidji State struggled with all season long. And it was goal scoring, and it was sloppy defensive turnovers. And it just, it stunk. It stunk that it had to end the way it did. But it was, like I tweeted out, man, the strangest hockey season I have ever covered or even like been a part of, like following from this team or any team really. You think about the highs of this season and they're pretty high. You won a game against Minnesota. The other game in Mariucci was really competitive, a 3-5 game where, you look dead for a minute and then you come back and score a goal or two. You have a competitive series with Augustana, or at least one competitive game the weekend before. You beat North Dakota in the season series for the second time ever. You win an overtime game at Amsoil Arena. It's just like there's some pretty good highs in here. You sweep Michigan Tech in Houghton during the Winter Carnival. Like there's really good highs. And then you look at the lows, and they are the lowest lows that maybe we've ever experienced as people who followed the hockey program, with getting swept back-to-back weekends at home, not back-to-back overall, but back-to-back home weekends. Getting swept by Ferris State and Northern Michigan is like, I don't even know how you got 0 of 12 points from that. It's not even like you got 3 and you lost 3 times in overtime or something like ridiculous like that. Like, no, it was just you played 4 bad games of hockey, and I don't even know. Like I said, the reason you want to go and you want to get into the game is because you don't know what Beaver team is going to show up. And unfortunately, it was the more inconsistent one. And especially against what I believe is probably the best team in the conference. Unfortunately, it pains me to say that. But in Mankato on the road, you really got to come out swinging from the get-go. And this team just really didn't, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, which Beaver team was going to show up? They've proven that they were a team that's capable of beating anybody, but they've also shown all year long that they're a team that's capable of losing to anybody. And I mean, like you said, the highs of the season were high, and the things that they were able to do were awesome. And I'm not going to whatever. I don't want to repeat everything you just said, but what you said is true. And I believe that. But yeah, it just felt like I was going into that game. I was like, there is a non-zero chance Bemidji State plays the game of their life and they end up squeaking by with a 2-1 win or something like that. But the moment that first goal went in the first period, kind of about midway through the first period, it was just like, well, not ideal, but you know what? That's one goal. We can overcome one goal. And the moment it became a 2-0 lead, it really just felt insurmountable with the way Bemidji State's offense has been this season. And two, I mean, the last time Bemidji State was down there, they didn't really score a ton of goals either. And the offense was hard to come by against the Mavs defense. And it's basically what it showed today or on Saturday. It wasn't a ton of great offensive looks, and any of the ones they had, they just couldn't cash in on. And that's the story of the season, right? With this offense, there weren't always the best looks coming from that offense. And every time you felt like there was a great opportunity, it just never really felt like they could take full advantage. And again, this is anecdotal, and I'm sure Lucas does a great job of Beaver territory of like keeping some of the underlying metrics. I'm sure like I'm wrong when I say this, or I'm not trying to say that I'm 100% right, but man, it just felt like there were so many opportunities for this team. And it felt like every time you'd watch them, like, okay, good offensive opportunity. And we did nothing with that. And that's just kind of what showed up against Mankato. You got down early and you really just, not that they don't have the dogs in them to come back, but they just really have never shown the ability to come back. And against a team is, like you said, unfortunately, as talented as Minnesota State, they're going to make you pay. This team has been around, these players, this atmosphere, like things like that. It's not like you're going into Augustana where they, again, you kind of got to jump them a little bit because this is their first playoff series and they don't quite know what's going on. And you were able to take advantage of them in that respect. You can't do that going down to Mankato. And that's unfortunately what happened. And I think overall, it's just the end of the day. Like they're just a more talented team and they found a way to win. And you just kind of have to shake your head at kind of the season that was. Ian, any other thoughts on the game, or do you kind of do we need to move to eulogize the season?
Yeah, I just like the game started off and you kind of hinted to it. It's like when you see the beginning of the game, it kind of hints at you what type of team you're going to see that night. And unfortunately, this was more of the same. Like at the time, Zach Kranich, I believe is how you pronounce his last name. I'm sorry if it's not. By the time he scored, I don't think the Beavers had a shot on goal. And that was, 8 minutes into the game. And you just can't, like, especially when you're playing a goaltender like Alex Tracy, like, yes, you want to pick your spots and make sure you get good shots because it's a good goaltender. So you want to have high chance, looks, because we've complained about that in the past where, they play big Blake Pietola and maybe they just throw it on net for the sake of getting a shot. But it's like, yeah, but that's never going to beat a good goaltender. So you have to give and take, I guess. But 0 shots, in that first period up to that point. And then they kind of got their feet under them for the end of the first period. They played a little bit better. And then the second period, CJ, I thought was I don't know where the team came from. They played phenomenally in the second period. It's just, how many times have we seen that this year where it's like, man, we're playing really well right now, but we really need to get that goal. Last year's team could get goals when they were having good stretches of play. This year's team cannot. It's burned us in so many periods, and that second period was huge. I'm not trying to single out any given player here, but Eric Martin had a golden sitter of a look that he whiffed on. I think it was Vince Corcoran that threw a beautiful pass across the ice to a little backside tip in is all it would have been. And Marty, unfortunately, couldn't put it away. And I just can't imagine how much different that game was if Martin puts that goal in and it's 1-1 midway through the second period. And now you've got a little bit of life in your step because you've played. What Mankato was doing to us in the first period, Bemidji was doing in the second period. They were making like confident passes in the neutral zone, which you didn't see at times this season. Like the passing was lackluster in the first period. And then in the second period, it's like, holy shit, dude, they're leaving the puck off. They're doing this creative, like passing. It's like they had a purpose out there offensively. They just couldn't put it in the back of the net. And that was so unfortunate because Mitch Wolf had a little bit of a blunder and turned the puck over. And those 2 goals that Adam Isley scored were really just the reason, we talk about Matthias Scholl in such a highlight. Matthias Scholl played a phenomenal game in this game, and he was really left out to dry twice on those 2 Adam Isley goals where, the first one was the Wolf turnover and it created a 2-on-1, and there's not a whole lot Scholl can do. Yeah, I mean, he's a great goaltender, but when you ask him to be Superman level, it's really hard to do that consistently. And then the second one, Kirkland Irie, he just fell over on the ice, and the Mavs went the other way, and essentially ended any hope that the Beavers were going to have in the third period of coming back. And then, for what it's worth, I kind of thought that the goal that the Beavers scored that got overturned was a little bit of bogus. However, I was at the arena. I got to look at it live, and then I got to look at it on the kid's phone that was sitting in front of me one time that they showed the replay before they made the call. And I was like, man, I don't know. I didn't see a whole lot there, and that really just crushed any semblance of a chance. Like if there was a 2% chance that Bemidji got a bunch of momentum with, 10 minutes, I think it was 9.5 minutes left in the game or something. Like
it's more at least like just not getting shut out.
Yeah, you shut out for the first time all season. Like I had that tweet typed out for like 3 minutes on my phone, just hoping to jinx it. And so like we could at least say that we didn't get shut out in the game. Because I stood up when we made it 3-1. And of course, I'm like the only Beaver fan in the area. And so I'm kind of looking around behind me and I'm like, hey, we're coming back, like sarcastically. And everybody just kind of laughed. And I was like, oh, this is going to be awkward if we score another goal. And then I have to be a little bit more serious about it. And then they're going to get angrier. And, but I don't know. Like it was a tough game. You know what? Offensive struggles and bad passing, bad turnovers. Like, I don't know. I mean, it sucked because I think if you look at, and maybe I'll save this for, I guess, when we kind of eulogize the season a little bit here. But it just sucks that it ended in the way that it did against the team that it did, the team that gives every one of these programs at Bemidji State. Doesn't matter if it's soccer, doesn't matter if it's football, doesn't matter if it's basketball, doesn't matter if it's softball. Up until a couple of years ago, had never won against Mankato ever. This team, we hate them, and we hate them for this reason, is because no matter what, they're always there outside of a couple of instances over the last couple of seasons. So that was the thing that really just made it even worse. Like if this was like Lake State that had a great year, like at least you can say like, all right, well, I guess
congrats to them.
Good for Lake State. They kind of stink and they had some success. Like cool. But yeah, it stinks, but it is what it is. It's not something we weren't ready for, right? Like it's not like we went in like last year and we were the heavy favorites against Lake State, and then if we would have lost that, it would have been a totally different issue. But yeah, a disappointing end to I think an overall pretty disappointing season.
Yeah, that's probably the best way to word it. And to go back on what you talked about a little bit earlier, which was, like you said, the turnovers that lead to odd man rushes, that lead to perfect opportunities for opposing teams. Again, this is anecdotal. So somebody who's smarter than me and pays more attention to the stats could probably run through this, but it just felt like there's so many times this year, it'd be a sloppy turnover to a back-breaking goal by the other team. And it just is. And whether it actually is or not, just there's this anecdotal, like demoralizing effect momentum wise it has on your team when you give up stuff like that. And when you just have that happen. And there's a little bit of, like you talked about, the offense last year, it felt like whenever they needed to get a goal, they were able to get one. And this year they were able to get some players in good spots. Like we talked about, there are times where it's like they play really well and they don't have anything to show for it. And is it unlucky? Is it that they're not good enough? Like there's just a little bit of like, in baseball, they talk about like creating your own luck a little bit. Like there's all a balance. I'm not trying to say what's the right thing here, but it's just one of those things where it just was frustrating because of the talent that we saw and the things we saw early in the season. And usually it's the non-conference schedule that gives us fits and we figure it out along the way in the CCHA schedule, but not this year. It's like the exact opposite.
One time I want them to put together the non-con and the conference schedule in the same season, man. Give us, and they did it like back in COVID era when we actually the 1 year that we made the tournament, there was no non-con schedule because of the fact that it was COVID. But the year before we did, we had a successful season. We were pretty much in a pairwise spot before that. But man, it would be so awesome if they could do it in one season because it's always one or the other.
Yeah, I know. It is what it is. And I think you kind of knew like early on. I remember that kind of series against Lake State where they kind of waffled and I was like, ooh, like I think maybe they won in overtime on the Friday and then the Saturday they just didn't play a great game at all. I was like, oh, that's That's weird. And then it just kept getting weirder and weirder. And then there was just a long stretch where they want to, like, for them to win a game in regulation. And they never swept a team. Like, it felt like all season long. Like, this was a team that was, it's a disappointing season overall because of the expectations we had coming into the year. But I think if you look back on this team, it's, for lack of a better term, just mediocre. And that doesn't mean bad. Mid. People always say like mid, and mid sometimes means bad. You're not bad if you're mid, because you're just bad then. Mid is like, you're not bad, but you're not great either. And that kind of what this team was. The team was capable of doing a lot of great things. The series they played against Augustana was really excellent. And then you also have performances like this where you're able to do that. The Michigan Tech series was really fun. But on the flip side, the Lake State series was not really fun. The Northern Michigan series, like all that kind of stuff. And I don't know, it's a mixed bag with this team, because that's what they were. They were just a mixed bag. And I think that's pretty much what I'm going to take away in the season. There was talent there, and they just never quite were able to have that materialize. But also there wasn't as much talent as there was a year ago. And we kind of knew that, because losing a player like Polkamp, you were never going to, no matter how many players they got in the portal. And I think we thought overall Bemidji State didn't have a bad portal in terms of what they brought in at the time. But we knew that there was nobody that was going to replace Polkamp. And I think there was an Eric Polkamp sized hole when it came to just playmaking in big moments. And there were other players too that were gone from last year's team that it can be included. But Polkamp is the big one because he still could have been on the team this year. There's just like a Polkamp sized hole in the playmaking ability of this team.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Polkamp is like the number one. You're absolutely right. We had Carter Ranklev, and we're talking about AJ McCauley. Like, he could come in and not replicate what Polkamp did, but at least shore that room up a little bit. And most nights he was either a healthy scratch or the extra skater, and he never lived up to it. Carter Ranklev had a good start to the season. We compared him to Mitchell Martin in the Discord, who came in and had like 5 goals in his first 4 games. And then that's exactly what Ranklev did. And he just fell off the face of the earth. He got scratched a couple times, and then he went pro. And so he wasn't even there to try to count on at the end of the season, which honestly, I kind of like, I hate to say it, like, cool, because now Noah Quinn, who desperately needed some minutes to get his development, is got a bigger starring role in the lineup, and he was one of the more bright spots on that line, I believe, with Jackson Judding, and I can't remember who else was on that line with them from most of the later half of the season, but yeah, it gives a chance for some younger guys to come in. And Riley Funk, obviously, his impact was immense. Him and Judding have been 2 of the best transfers we've had come in here over the last couple of seasons. They've been great, but you're right. Just overall, not enough. And I think that's what we talked about a little bit pre-show. If you take this season and you said January 4th, I still think January 4th, I had a little bit more hope than February 4th, after January happened.
January killed them, I think. It just killed the vibes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like, December was bad, but January really kind of killed it, where it's like, oh, God, we're terrible. If you were to tell me after January that we end up in the CCHA semifinals and we lose a game to Mankato, who's clearly a better team than us, cool. That's awesome. We had a really good run at the end of the season. And then we ended the season like that. That's awesome. That's fun. But if you tell me this in October, I'm going to look at the season. You finish as the 7 seed, you play terribly at home most of the time. And then you get to the semifinals again, but yet again, you cannot get past that hump. And it feels like every time we have a chance to really do some damage in a tournament, this one's so much different than, like, I think back to the first Mason Cup game we were in Mankato, like, sorry, that one was much more winnable than this one. I think if you look at it from a pregame standpoint, the Mason Cup last year, the game against Lake Superior State, where we really thought we had it, like, Mankato had just lost to Northern Michigan the semifinal before in the COVID era. And then we lose to Lake State, and Lake State wins the championship. And then we have to go be the 4 seed in that region. Granted, it worked out because we got to play Wisconsin then, and we won. So like it was maybe for the better, but like you still left that CCA or WCHA championship.
There's still some hardware
line.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like at some point we got to start winning these trophies, man, because getting a couple McNaughton Cups every 6 years is fun. But yeah, we need to be able to be a little more consistent in the tournament as well. And like I said, this year is a little bit different just because you came in with such different expectations to the tournament than any of those other runs that you had. So yeah, it's just this game in and of itself disappointing for sure. I'm not really like we blew it. We blew this huge chance. Like, yeah, but what was the chance we really had going into it?
Right. And even if, let's say, I mean, because Bemidji State last year, it was the conference was down regular season wise compared to what it was this year. Let's say Bemidji State even came in as like a 4 or a 3 seed, going into the tournament, and they and you get an opportunity to go and whatever. I still, again, I hate to say this, but it still was probably Mankato's conference to lose this year. And, whatever thing you could have did, again, your high-end talent just was lower than what it was a year ago at this time. This is an interesting question. I want to throw it your way just to see what your opinion is. Do you think last year's Bemidji State team, if they go into Mankato, I know it's a different story, but how different? Like, do you think that team has a chance to go in there and just clean up and go home, or like squeak one out? Or like, how do you think last year's team, if they were to go down to the Mayo against this year's Mankato team, how do you think that ends up going?
It would be a much closer game than this. I think you would see one of those very classic Bemidji Mankato, like 2-1 or like 3-2, because while Tracy's in net and it's hard. And that's something that we didn't give enough credit to. Like Tracy made some I told him to, fuck off at one point because I'm like, dude, you got to be kidding me. Like, and that was in the third period when everything was already kind of boiling.
There was a lot of pent up rage that needed.
Really, dude, it's 3-0, and you just like sprawled out and made a scorpion kick save or whatever the hell.
Oh, what a try hard.
Exactly. But it's like I do think that team would probably even have a chance to win this game. Like you look at 3 players that would make a huge difference on that team. Okay, so if you're taking away Riley Funk, that stinks. But I think if you're replacing that with Leighton Road, you'll get over it. And then you get Carter Jones back, who I think was a really underrated loss, at least compared to, what we were talking about just based off losing Loft and Polkamp and Road. Like Jones is not those 3 players, but you get him back to help replicate some of that. And then, yeah, I think that team probably has a really good chance to win that game, even in Mankato with Loft and Polkamp, especially. It shores up the defense a lot. And I think that's a much, much better game. And the Beavers honestly might have a really good chance to come out on top if that's the case.
Well, yeah, especially if you count on like they're not going to give up as bad of turnovers as this year's iteration gave up. So that already helps you. And yeah, you just have a little bit more dynamic scoring. Yeah, it ends up, I'm not saying that like that last year's team would have just went in there and won and came back, like 1-3-1 and came back to Bemidji. But like, yeah, I think that, yeah, it would have just been a much closer game. So I don't know. It is what it is. And I think you just kind of have to move on and you pick up the pieces from this season. What are some of the positive things from this year, Ian, that we can kind of go into the future with like, okay, well, we have this solidified. Again, we're recording this before any transfer portal stuff has become official, but like You're going into next season with this, and this should make you feel good. If you're a Beaver fan who needs some, let's try and get things going on a more positive note here.
I think and this is going to be like a weird positive note because it's like almost a negative, but it's just like the fact that you think that it can't get worse, right? Like if this is what we had this year, at least you go into the optimism of next year saying, I think we're going to have a lot of new players. Like I do think we're going to lose some guys to the portal. I think that's a little bit unavoidable at this point in time. The seasons that you say, oh, we didn't lose anybody like a couple seasons ago, that's really fun and awesome to have that, but it's probably just not going to be the case
in this era of college hockey. It's just a luxury you're just not going to be able to avoid it.
And especially like you never know. And I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm in the dressing room with these guys, like talking to some of these younger guys who are healthy scratches most of the nights, because now, especially seeing some of the senior forwards and fifth year guys that are going to be leaving, they know they'll have a shot if they stick around and vie for ice time next year, because there's so many spots opening up. But you just never know what one of those guys is thinking they want to get out, or any of these defensemen or anything like that. So it's really hard to say. I think we have a pretty good goaltender in, I believe it's Max Hildebrand coming in from the WHL, from what I understand from my sources, which is just Lucas. He's probably one of the better goaltenders in the WHL. So that'll be interesting to see. Like, obviously you thought you had good goaltending for most of Matthias Scholl's career, which you did. I'm not trying to say that you thought, like, you know what I mean? And then, yeah, just from an offensive perspective, like, how could it possibly get worse than it was this year? You know, yeah, you're losing a lot of guys, but I would say that you have reason to be optimistic just because of how different this team will look, and whether or not that turns into another chance at a McNaughton Cup, I don't know. I doubt it as of right now, but I think at the very least, a season this disappointing is probably not on the cards. And even if it is, you're not going to go in expecting it, just because there's optimism. Like, this year sucked so bad because of the fact that we were thinking we were going to go back to back and thinking we were going to make that run. I think if we go into this season with the expectation of being a 4 seed and then we get the 7, it's like, dang, just couldn't quite live up to it, or lost a couple games, and that would have been the difference between home ice. But yeah, I think that's the main thing for me, is just optimism based off of potential and what I don't know, and assuming that it hopefully can't get worse than it was this year.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. This was a very veteran team, and coming off of a McNaughton Cup season, you think, okay, well, same goaltender. We lost the high-end offensive. We lost the high-end talent a little bit, but, you know, this is an experienced team. This is a veteran team. Like, they know what's going on, and they're just going to be able to, you know, kind of outwill the rest of the CCHA because we were the champions last year and we kind of blah, blah, blah. I mean, the other thing too is, I mean, Rhett Pitlick also went to, I mean, that was a very late addition for Mankato that really did help them. I mean, coming out of nowhere with him going from the Gophers to Mankato, like, that was a huge swing that happened late. Like, it happened like in the early fall, didn't it? It was pretty,
it was like weeks left until the college hockey season, I think, or it was either weeks left until college hockey or weeks left until like the school year started. But it was late that he just joined up, and then it's like, holy cow. And I think this team still would have been one of the better teams in the conference without Rhett, but you add a 30-plus point forward of the year into the mix, and, like, I do think that they may have looked a little bit more similar to where it was last year, where they were kind of fighting like with Augustana, come closer to that final weekend of the season. And you just never know how much Pitlick is going to play into that, because he had a big share in the 3 points that they took from Bemidji earlier this year. And you brought up Loafton, Polkamp, and Road. Like, I just think that that's one thing that we as a community didn't take into account as much, as like losing, like, what was it, 70 points? Like,
that's just a lot of production.
Never going to get replicated. Like 70, 75, whatever they had, like, that was so much more production than I think a lot of us, like, really.
You were going to need, like, somebody to come out of nowhere to replace that in terms of the high end talent aspect.
Right. Like, it would have had to been like, you know, Noah Quinn comes in, and I'm just using, it could have been any forward, but, like, you know, Jackson Panzer comes in from where you thought he was going to be in Grand Forks, and now he's scoring 25 points in his freshman season for Bemidji State. And, you know, Jake McLean or Reese Chinton takes a jump, and they're up above 20 points this year as well. Like, and then you would have had to have more offense from your defenders as well. Like, you would have had to have a lot more click your way to replicate that than I think any of us truly accounted for when we were kind of taking into account how good this team was going to be this year. But yeah, that definitely hurt a little bit more than I think any of us expected it to.
Yeah, and this is and I don't want to get too kind of big on the 30,000-foot view on this episode, because I know we're going to have some guests on and we're going to talk about the hockey season as a whole and the conference as a whole. So I don't want to get too deep in the weeds on some of these discussions, because we're going to have them with people who are smarter on hockey than I am. But my big message is this: is like, you're still going to have to find something, because Mankato, unfortunately, is not going away. Unfortunately, Augustana is only going to get better. Bowling Green is going to continue to be feisty, and they're like, they're still you still should be expected to contend in the top half of the conference. That's not changed. Northern's down still, Ferris is down still, Lake State's still like you still should be. St. Thomas is going to, when are they officially leaving the conference?
Next year's their last year in the CCHA.
So they're still going to be around next year. Like they got their new barn coming up next year, I believe.
Yeah, next year. Yep, that was the last game in the St. Thomas Ice Arena, and that's a great point, CJ. Like, that's the scariest thing to me is like, you look at every other team in this conference, and even if you don't include St. Thomas, who is going to be gone a year from now or 2 years from now, Mankato, brand new head coach, seems like they kind of took one step back and now 2 steps forward again. They're right back where they were. Augustana, great head coach, like very good program.
That program has great infrastructure.
They're going to be here, and they're going to be a top half contender more often than not. Bowling Green, Dennis Williams took over, and he looks like he's a really good head coach. And they
cleaned up the mess that they kind of had.
Yeah, they cleaned up the mess they kind of had. They're usually a middle of the pack and contender. Historically, Michigan Tech. They're kind of a mess sometimes, but they're always going to be there, and then you even look at the bottom half of the conference, and what can Joe Shyak do with Northern Michigan, or Dave Shyak, not Joe Shyak, Joe Sean. What can Shyak do with Northern Michigan? Obviously this year was a disaster, but they lost everybody. What did you expect him to do? So what can Shyak do?
They still swept Bemidji State, so they still
exactly, we can't trash talk them right now. Ferris State, Bob Daniels is stepping away, but what are they going to get in to replace him, and how is that going to impact their program? I think the only one right now that you can look at and say, all right, they're probably not going to bother us is Lake Superior State, because everybody every year falls for the Lake Superior State, November, December run where they end up in, they're a really sneaky
they came out of nowhere
team right now. And it's like, guys, give it 2 months. Oh, where did they finish? In 8th place, and they got swept by Mankato in the first round of the playoffs. Classic Lake State. But yeah, that's just typically how it kind of works. But that's the scarier thing too, is you don't really know what to expect from every other team in this conference. It seems like things are trending in the right direction. And for BSU, they just went so far down, from hero to zero in one season. So that's the difficult part.
And that's the thing too, is it felt like this really was a year to take advantage. Now, again, that was, if we're talking about what we were saying at the beginning of the year, or even over the summer or at the end of last year, which again, barring, we didn't expect Mankato to take kind of this jump to get back to kind of where they were this quick. Not that we didn't think they could do it. I think we always knew that they were a potential to jump right back up, but it just kind of took them. They needed to, like you said, kind of get their feet under them.
I was hoping it would take them 2 to 3 years before they kind of eventually found their footing. Cause that's the thing with a program like that, is it's probably only going to be a matter of time. It's not.
And Strand was an assistant on the staff. Exactly. It's not like they had a complete overhaul of the program. It's just the main guy left, but the bones are still there and the people are still there. And well, things like that.
Strand came from the USHL, I believe.
Oh, okay.
Or the NAW, one of the two. I think it was Sioux Falls or something like that.
Either way, but it's more than just the head coach that's there. There's
right.
Again, the administration that's there. That community is going to pump money into it. All that stuff. That just wasn't going away. And the fact of the conference that you play in. But that's also the thing. It's not like this conference, I love the CCHA. I really do. But, that's not to say that any of these teams are perennial juggernauts that you're just going to be, Nebraska, Omaha in the NCHC or something like that. You are going to be you still there still is an opportunity to come back. Bemidji State still is well coached, and with territory, they still are going to be they're still going to be in the mix. But I mean, overall, it's just hard to try and spin stuff into a positive after the way.
Yeah, that's exactly correct. It's really hard to kind of put a super positive spin on this season and kind of where we came from and where we got to at this point. But yeah, we've gone on 35 minutes almost with talking about the men's hockey team and how much they've disappointed us this year. I think at this point we could probably move on because, like you said, we hope to have others on at some point in the very near future to discuss kind of where they think this season went wrong and what they have is in terms of optimism for the future. So
yeah, we've talked a lot about hockey. It's I mean, we're going to have a full episode eulogizing stuff with a guest. I don't know who we're going to get on, but we'll get somebody on to kind of take a deep dive in, and we'll rehash some of this stuff again. So I don't want to get too caught into the weeds on hockey stuff because we do have some other Bemidji State sports to talk about, Ian, before we kind of dive into the spring sports that are now not in full swing, but it's getting there. And softball had a really nice week. We'll talk about that in a second. Before we do, Ian, we should plug the Discord.
Yeah, get in the Discord. It's the place to be, the Beaver Banter Discord. The link is on all of our social media pages. It's super fun. We've gotten quite a few people to join. We had a lot of brand new people this season chat in all of our live hockey game threads. We do other game threads. Some of them we've done were for the women's hockey game, for Hockey Day Minnesota. We would do other huge playoff events for football. We would do the same for any other program that happens to make a deep tournament run in their conference tournament or the NCAAs. Softball might be trending that way with a deep tournament run this year. Hopefully we can get back in the NSIC tournament again. And it's always a good place, especially with this transfer portal news. If you don't want to be glued to Twitter all the time, you get in the Discord, you turn notifications on, and you get in that recruiting channel, and you understand perfectly who's coming in, who's going. It's a really good place to be to kind of centralize all your Bemidji State news and media that you want to be following, because there's a lot of good people in there with a lot of good sources. So it's been awesome. It's really turned into exactly what I wanted it to be when we kind of had the idea to get something started for that. And it's just it's an easy way for people to follow, just like I think Jack said last week when he talked to us. It's super helpful for people that live down in the cities that can't always get to games or follow games as closely as they want. So get in there. It'll be a fun summer, I'm sure, just like it's been the last 2 off seasons that we've had it now.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a great place to catch up on all those news. In fact, I guess if we want to talk about women's transfer portal news for Bemidji, there really isn't any, which I get, is a good sign so far. Nobody's transferred out of the program, and you kind of are operating under that where you don't have any holes to plug at the moment, or any kind of more that jump out at you in the course of the portal. So shout out to Lucas of Beaver territory for that scoop. And again, you can find all that in the Discord. You could talk about it with people. You can ask questions. Lucas does a great job with Beaver territory. There's Jared Rubedo, of the Bemidji Pioneer, that's in there. There's people that are plugged into Bemidji State stuff that get to talk about all of this, which is really, really cool. So yeah, hop in that Discord.
Young boy is in there.
He is in there. Yes, he is.
He is there.
He is there.
No shade.
Unfortunately,
no shade.
No shade at all. I am in there. Ian, of course, is very active in there, and talking with a bunch of stuff, and just, it's a great opportunity to stay connected on Bemidji State things. We also talk about other sports. If you're like over the summer and you're looking for things to talk about, we do talk about other stuff as well. But yeah, it's a great place to be. So, all right, Ian, let's talk a little spring sports here. Let's talk about softball. They had such a great week since we last spoke. So when we last spoke, upon last recording, they were getting ready to play Lake Erie College Tuesday afternoon of last week. They got a 13-8 win there. And then they got a 9-1 victory in 5 innings against Queens College. Again, all these games are taking place at Legends Park in Clearmont, Florida, a part of the I don't know if it's a challenge or if these are called the spring games. So it's just basically they're just hosting a bunch of games down here for a bunch of teams from the north. And then this is kind of the cherry on top of this performance. And I'm going to say, just considering who they were playing, that your best win of the season is a 1-0 victory against the University of Indianapolis. Why is that a good victory, Ian? Well, they were ranked 16th in the country going into that game, and Bemidji State was able to squeak by with a 1-0 victory. Just a really nice statement for this program. They wrapped up. They had some losses against Emporia State and St. Martin's University to end kind of their time in Florida. They are now getting ready to play conference play this weekend at Bemidji against Concordia St. Paul and Southwest Minnesota State. But going back to the game against University of Indianapolis, a 1-0 victory, their biggest win of the season, and just a really nice, not exclamation point in terms of like slamming the door on anything, but this is a really nice moment early in the year to be like, hey, this could be a team worth following all season long.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was always kind of cautiously optimistic the first couple of weeks where you're seeing like, all right, they're 2-2. That's kind of good. That's kind of cool that they're, a little bit better than they were last year. And then they win a couple more games and they stay at 500 and they're 5-5. And it's like, all right, cool. And now, yeah, they've proven that they can compete with anybody now. That's their first ranked win since 2021. I don't know if you said that or not. I can't remember. But yeah, it's cool to have them being competitive. And now you really find out where they're going to be slotted in the NSIC, because now you're going to have some benchmarks to go against with some other teams that are now you're more more familiar with playing. So I'm excited to see how this means that they will jump into the NSIC play, because we talked about a couple seasons ago they made that run in the NSIC tournament where the softball, not every team makes the NSIC tournament, similar to basketball. I think it's like the top 11 teams or something. It was a weird number, an odd number of teams.
Was that with the whole Upper Iowa thing? Was that still? I can't remember.
No, I think that was 2 years ago when Upper Iowa was still in the conference.
Yeah, so it was their last year. Yeah.
To me, out of like 16 teams or whatever it was, that they took the top 11, I think. But who knows? That'll be something I look more into if we continue to have some success over this season. But yeah, I'm excited. This is the biggest bump. Last year spring sports didn't really have that program that unfortunately nobody took the reins and was able to control the airwaves for us like softball and men's golf were a couple of seasons ago. So it's exciting to see them performing so well out of conference. Like we said, almost every week, it's so impossible for us to tell what this actually means for the team. So seeing a guaranteed, like this is a ranked team, we know they're thought highly of, at least in some aspect in the country, and we're able to compete with them. And obviously softball and baseball can be a little bit of a weird sport like that. Like,
it can be very matchup based. Yeah.
Any given game, you might have a great chance to win it. Like, it's not necessarily as cut and dry as basketball or football or soccer or something like that, but it is cool still to see them being able to be up there and be competitive against these teams. And I'm like I said, very excited to see where they can slot in here as we get the season underway in the NSIC play.
Yeah, to go back to that 1-0 victory, Kennedy Joachim got a 7-inning complete game, allowed 4 hits, 1 walk, 10 strikeouts throughout the game, and of course the 1 run came off of an RBI double earlier in the game from Mariah Stevenson that scored Amy Christensen. So just overall, a really nice game for Bemidji State, just to focus in on that one. But really, when they left the tournament, they played 14 games down in Florida at the spring games at Clearmont specifically. And they came away with an 8-6 record. And I think overall, it's not that, oh my gosh, they're this juggernaut this year. But like you said, you just look at them and you go, okay, you know what? Like, I'm intrigued. They're 13-11. You can't, it's really hard to gauge non-conference schedule, but Bemidji State went 2-2 in non-conference games against conference opponents. And overall, I'm just really excited to see what this team can do now that they finally are ready to dive in to the NSIC play. It starts this weekend against Concordia St. Paul on Saturday. It's in Bemidji. Now it says the softball field. We were talking about this before we recorded, Ian, that they will play on the BSU football field if they have to, because it's turfed. You throw some bases down. It's not ideal, but at least you get home games. But it's like a high of 31 on Saturday in Bemidji, and the bats are just like, it's going to be too cold to use your bats. So they're probably not going to play on Saturday, at least as of recording this podcast, but that's nothing official. You then play Southwest Minnesota State on Sunday, and then on Wednesday you go on the road to take on Duluth, and then Sunday, March 30th, or excuse me, that's Wednesday the 26th. So next Wednesday you're at UMD, and then next Sunday you're at Sioux Falls. You'll definitely be able to get those in. St. Cloud State on April 1st. You should be able to get those games in. And then, we'll see what happens come April. That's a couple weeks from now. But overall, this is going to be a fun team to follow. I think this season they've shown that they've gotten, that they just have off on a nice start, and especially in spring where, like you said, sometimes it can be a mixed bag with spring sports in Bemidji. I think overall this is going to be a really interesting season to see what Coach Peterson and company can kind of do with getting this team on the right track. And this is going to be something that this program is going to try and go through now, as basically she started in the 2022 season, so 22, 23, 24, 25. She's coming into her fourth season now at the helm of Bemidji State softball, and it'll be interesting to see what kind of team they can put together this season.
Yeah, exactly. I'm super excited for it, and can't wait for this weekend when hopefully we get some softball conference play underway. Like you said, CJ, we don't know how that Saturday games are going to go, but we'll see. Hopefully we can get at least a couple of games in so that we got something to talk about next week when we come back in terms of an update on the softball team.
Yeah, looking now to the baseball side of things, they continue conference play. Last time we talked, they wrapped up some games against Augustana. They then played a 4-game series at Wayne State, and they lost 4 of those games. They lost 9-5, 12-zip, 6-3, and 19-1. And overall, just looking at now, they are going to go to Southwest Minnesota State for 4 games over the weekend, and that'll kind of be their weekend series as they go down to Marshall. Again, unclear if those games will get in or not, but as of right now, they are scheduled to be Saturday and Sunday afternoons, respectively. And we'll just kind of see what happens. But overall, just kind of, again, the baseball team 1-13 to start the year, 0-8 in conference play. Now, granted, Wayne State and Augustana, again, there's some teams in slightly warmer climates that just have a little bit better at the jump for baseball. But overall, that's kind of where things stand with Bemidji State baseball in that regard. Ian, anything?
Not much, man. It's another, rocky start for the baseball team, but we'll see. They got a couple of games coming up, hopefully this weekend. But yeah, we've discussed the geographic struggles that this team has with baseball, and there's obviously more than just that goes into it, but it makes it tough. It makes it tough, especially when you can't be playing games in Bemidji for a long, long time. We'll see.
Men's golf, by the way, we were talking last week. They were wrapping up the Mavericks spring invite down in Arizona. The team did finish 7th out of 11 in that one overall with the tournament down in, I believe that was Goodyear, Arizona. Yeah, Goodyear, Arizona. And overall, as we look at as kind of the tournament wraps up, freshman Brogan Pascal fired a 6 under par to win the Maverick Desert Classic Tuesday evening. So he competed as an individual and led all golfers at the meet, winning the individual title by 4 strokes at his first collegiate meet. So even though the team finished 7th out of 11, that's impressive.
Yeah, he killed it, man. I think he won NSIC Golfer of the Week a couple of weeks ago when that happened.
You know what the heck? It's Beaver Banter Player of the Week as well.
Yeah, throw it to him, Congrats to him. That's awesome, because I know, like we said a couple of years ago, we had some players have individual success and turn that into team success as well. So 7th out of 11, definitely not lighting the world on fire, but it's a respectable finish, and you just never know what other teams were there competing and how high the quality was. They've got the NSIC preview about a week from today, as we're recording this. It's next Monday and Tuesday, so we'll see how much of that is wrapped up by the time we talk next week. But that's stuff to come for them in the future here.
Yeah. Can I say something before we talk about women's golf and some of these other things as we wrap up?
Yeah.
I'm looking at Brogan Pascal's page here, and I want to see if I can pull it up here on the video stream. It's why you should watch on YouTube well with the Beaver Banter podcast. I want to point out a couple things. One, he's a freshman from Gilbert, Arizona, so kind of getting a chance. I don't know where they are geographically speaking, but he did get to go back down to his home state and go golf in Goodyear. He's from Basha High School down in Gilbert. But more importantly, Ian, can you see this? Look at this hat he's wearing. I want that.
I did see that. Yeah, those are really nice, man. It's unfortunate because you want to leave some of that stuff like exclusive to the athletes.
You want it to be a perk, yeah.
But it sucks because they really give a lot of the really good stuff to the athletes. And some of us here at home are just kind of left lacking. You know, I've had this hat since I was a freshman in college. And every time I go back up there, there's not a whole lot more for selection in the bookstore. And that's another issue, is that maybe the bookstore is one of the only places you can get it. But I don't want to dive into that right now, I guess. But yeah, that hat, along with, you know, we talked about it with the hats, the beanies that the women's team were wearing on Hockey Day and how clean those were. Some of this stuff, man, hopefully at some point, like after they're done, after they're retired from the athletic department, they need to manufacture just a few more to get them into circulation for the public.
My bank account is crying for them. Please.
Yes.
For those who are only listening to the audio feed, it's like your stereotypical like golf hat based on, like, it's white. It's got like the front that has kind of like the kind of front where like the seam kind of sticking out a little bit on top. And it's all white hat, white bill, and it's just got a green Bemidji State script going across it. I would pay a lot of American currency to have that in my possession. I really would. That would be such a fun hat to golf. That'd be, and I suck at golfing, but at least I would look good going out there and doing some of that. I think Bemidji State's baseball hats are really nice just because they're different. And I think that they're really cool. The bookstore used to sell them. And then last time I think I was on campus for whatever reason, I think it was a football game, walked by thinking maybe they'd still be around and I didn't see them, but maybe I just missed them too. That could also be a case, but that's it's just really cool. So congrats to Brogan again for the first place finish. And it's cool that he's a freshman getting to do that. And you get to see kind of his career grow a little bit as
Gilbert is about 42 miles away from Goodyear, by the way, about a 45-minute drive through Phoenix.
So no wonder he did so well. He probably has golfed there before. Like,
he probably played on that course many a times before. That's a little bit of a home field advantage.
I'll take it.
Good on the BSU recruiting department, looking ahead at the future schedule and where they're going to have to play some invites and making sure they get some Arizona golfers in there.
Right, exactly. They're going to go to, like you said, for the NSIC preview next Monday. They're going to play at Blue Springs, Missouri on Monday and Tuesday. And then they have the Fort Hays Tiger Classic in Kansas. They then go to Upper Iowa it's the Upper Iowa Invite that's in Waterloo, Iowa. And then they will go to Rockhurst for Spring Hill, Kansas on April 15th. And then it's the Men's Golf Championship that is in Blue Springs, Missouri. Of course, the preview is basically just to give golfers an opportunity to golf on the course that they are going to do the conference meet on, essentially, so everybody gets a chance to play it at least once. Checking in on women's golf, have high school sports on the brain this week. Women's golf, what's going on there?
They finished 11th out of 12 in the Southwest. The SMSU Spring Challenge that was in Litchfield Park, Arizona, and they don't have anything in the near future. Their next thing is the Augustana Spring Invitational in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. That will be all the way in April on April 7th and 8th, Monday and Tuesday. So almost a full month off in between their events here. I don't know if they had two different invitationals that they played at SMSU or like three. they've got
Right.
3 different, like back in September, they played one. And then the last 2 things have been hosted by SMSU as well. So interesting to say the least. They got 12th of 12, unfortunately, in the first one, which I'm now seeing was also in Litchfield Park. And then they improved by 1 and got 11th of 12 in the latest one. So moving up in the world. Hopefully we can keep doing that. And then eventually they'll be national champions. So
Yeah, exactly. Looking at it's all it takes. It's all it takes. Track and field again. They compete in the indoor stuff that's going on, so nothing really on the outdoor schedule as of right now. Tennis is probably the last kind of this is the last sport I believe we've got to clean up on here for today's episode.
yeah, tennis has unfortunately done nothing since late February. That last game match that they had was against Minnesota Morris that they won 7-0. They're still 4-3 on the season, but they do play another couple of games this weekend, Friday and Saturday in Fargo, North Dakota against Sioux Falls and Augustana in NSIC play. So hopefully they can continue to build on their 2-0 conference record and stay at the top of the standings up there in Fargo. That would be awesome to see. Another couple of games coming down the pipeline here this weekend. Or I'm sorry, matches. They're officially matches. I'm sorry. But yeah, good for them too, because they kind of are making a little bit more noise than they did last year, which is awesome.
All right. Anything else that we need to wrap up the podcast on? I think we tried to be as hopeful as we could be, all things considered with hockey. Good thing Saul had a nice week to kind of keep the positive vibes rolling. But we still have a couple hockey episodes, I'm sure, whether we kind of get a big group together or whether we talk with a couple hockey people over the course of the next couple weeks here. But here we go. It's weird. We're still in March and it snowed on Saturday, but we're already we're done with winter sports and it's time to look at the spring sports portion of the Beaver Banter podcast, which for a couple of reasons is always a trip. One, because the games are played during the day, and so it's hard to follow. And the other is like, again, there are good streaming options to watch stuff, but again, it's a little bit different with that. And also, again, games are just kind of when you can get them in. So sometimes it doesn't always line up with our schedules where it's like, oh, it's a Saturday night. Perfect. I can sit down and watch the Bemidji State women's basketball game or something like that. Nope. It's like, oh, softball played at 2 PM because you needed to get this game in at 2 PM on a Tuesday because you need to get this game in before the season ends next week. Sorry, I wasn't able to catch that one. But anyway, here we go. It's the spring sports season, and we're going to roll with it on the Beaver Banter podcast. Anything else, Ian, to close out the show?
I don't think so. Roll Beavs, even after a tough hockey season, for men's and women's, really, and less than ideal basketball conditions. This was probably one of the rougher winters we've had, but I'm sure this university will rebound and be ready for action next October already, as it already feels like it's creeping towards us.
I was going to say, was rebound a pun? Was that intended?
Yes. They can rebound and shoot a slap shot. I don't know. I got nothing for double entendres there.
All right. That's probably our cue to be done. I'm CJ Baumgartner. That's Ian Rivers. We'll see you next week. This is the Beaver Banter podcast.